Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel. Today, we're going to talk about boundaries. Boundaries is a topic that I talk about a lot in therapy, and I'm going to use a personal life experience to talk about this. Today's video is brought to you by Nosy Neighbors. So my wife and I have lived in our neighborhood for probably about a decade. I don't have the exact move-in date memorized or anything. We've been there for a while. Um, we were millennials who were lucky enough to become homeowners. So go team. So yeah, we've been dealing with a neighbor issue. I guess I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. We don't have an HOA. We're not like a bougie neighborhood or anything. Just a regular city. We live in the city of Milwaukee type neighborhood. So this is a good example of what not to do and how to handle things better. So we have bird feeders up in our yard. We have a tree in our front yard, and we put up 2 bird feeders. And a while ago, I don't know, I've been joking for months. I feel like that I'm in my millennial stage of life where I'm into bird watching. Which isn't true. I'm a terrible bird watcher. I don't know the names of the birds, like the types. Not that I'm naming all our birds. I know very little about bird knowledge, and what I do know is from the board game Wingspan, which I highly recommend. But I'm not a bird expert, but I like nature and I like having my coffee. We've got a big bay window, so I like having my coffee, looking out the window, checking out the birds, squirrel. We had 2 bunnies this morning. That was exciting. 2 bunnies in the yard, and like I don't know, we have no mow May. We let our grass mow. We care about the environment. We have a wasp's nest in our tree recently that we had to get out. So like we care about the environment, but also have little kids, and I don't know, keep our yard functional because that's what our yard is for, with liking nature. We've got a rose bush up front, some bushes that I don't trim very often, but it doesn't look like, I don't know. It's not like we have broken down cars or anything in our front yard. It's just a normal city yard. It's not the nicest, neatest. I don't pay someone to fertilize the lawn. I want there to be bees and pollinators and good, healthy stuff for the environment. So we also have bird feeders. I don't know. They're normal, cheap bird feeders you get from Fleet Farm or wherever. I don't know where people not in the Midwest shop for things like that. They're just basic, simple bird feeders. We fill them up, get some birds. So they've been up for months. And the other day, we got an anonymous letter in the mail from a neighbor. No return address, but like literally mailed. They put a forever stamp on it and put it through the mail. No return address, and the letter was written anonymously from our friends on the name of the street we live on. They listed 2 streets, so trying to be extra suspicious. And they just like listed why they don't like bird feeders and wrote it in like a polite but kind of like, thanks for your help on this, resolving this issue, which like there's not an issue. There's no issue. They just don't like bird feeders. So it was really bizarre, and it was from someone who's anonymous. And so this is not great healthy boundaries. And like, spoiler alert for people who are like, should I write a letter to my neighbor and not sign my name? No, don't do that. That's not how good communication happens. So good communication is relational. And so if your neighbor's doing something up front, like, and it's not a safety hazard, like if your neighbor's running a meth lab, don't do this. Like, my advice is not for that. Contact the authorities. Methamphetamines are bad. They are illegal. So, but generally speaking, if it's a dog barking, if it's they have music playing late at night, whatever it is, like, go talk to them. Now, this is coming from a dude who's 6'3", 200 pounds, former college athlete. Like, I'm not trying to say like I'm some big scary MMA fighter. I'm just saying like I'm a big dude. I don't think about my physical safety as like the first concern. So again, like, go with friends, let someone know where you're going. Like, don't get abducted by Buffalo Bill. But like, again, that's not a realistic fear. So my point is like relationships matter most. So if you're wanting to talk to a neighbor about how they're living their lives and it is somehow bothering you, and the examples I listed were like noise at night, barking dog, maybe, like, if there's some harm. So one of the issues I had with the letter I got from my neighbor is like there is no harm. They basically were like sparrows are bad. And again, I don't know anything about birds, so like I'm open to this information. Like, oh, I had no idea sparrows were bad. But a cursory Google check, and then like because I'm a psychology nerd who cares about peer-reviewed information, looking for actual peer-reviewed data about bird feeders, I found that sparrows aren't particularly bad for the environment, and the people who dislike sparrows tend to be snobby bird watchers, and they dislike sparrows because they're not as exciting as things like cardinals or blue jays. Like blue jays are also aggressive birds, just as aggressive as sparrows. From my cursory Google check, which is does not make me an expert, right? Like I'm not claiming an expertise about birds. I'm acknowledging I know very little about birds. I had to learn things about birds because of this letter. But the one journal that I did find that was about birds that seems to be like an actual scientific journal, I couldn't find something that passed peer review. I don't have any frame of reference for what a peer review journal in the world of birds are, or anthology. I only know that from a comic book because I'm rereading Watchmen. Anyway, sparrows are not bad for the environment, as this friendly anonymous letter tried to say to me without citing any sources. And I got suspicious about that because there were no sources cited. Now, what does this have to do with boundaries, right? So like if let's say somebody's having a party, let's say someone's shooting off fireworks in the city of Milwaukee, which is illegal, gang. It's illegal. Don't shoot off fireworks. They're the worst. 4th of July is the worst. If you're a pet owner, if you're a combat veteran or a first responder, or if you have children, fireworks are the worst. Stop shooting them off. They're illegal in the state to shoot off, but own is fine. It's a stupid rule. We should fix it. Anyway, that's causing some actual qualitative, quantifiable harm, then talk to your neighbor about it, right? Like explaining, hey, I've got a kid who's sleeping, or hey, like we have a newborn who's colicky, or those types of things are much more likely to get an actual positive response from a neighbor than no relationship. So that's why going and talking to them as a person, owning your stuff, explaining why this is important to you, and explaining where you're coming from, because we as human beings are wired for relationships, and much of our knowledge base and our decision-making systems are based off of relationships. I tend to be a social constructionist in my philosophy, which means that knowledge is created, co-created through relationships. And so having a conversation means that we can create new, novel information. So I didn't know in my neighborhood we had sleeping children. I'm going to try and be quiet during this time. Now, like as somebody who's had kids, like I get irritated when people are making noise at 1 PM because my kid's napping. And there's nothing I like less than my child being woken up early from their rest time. But like I have to adjust for that, right? As a member of society, that's me. We have white noise machine, things to help my kids sleep through noise. I'm not trying to go out and say like, hey, don't make any noise at 1 PM. My kid's napping. Now, if I was like exhausted always because I have multiple kids who are colicky, let's say you like, whoops, you have triplets, bummer for you. Not throwing shade at people who have triplets, but I never wanted to have multiples because that sounds exhausting. And like you're at your wit's end and somebody's like practicing trumpet outside. Like I don't think it's without it. I don't think it's outside the realm to go and have a conversation with that person. Could they practice at a different time? Or like, this is when our kid naps and like we've been doing sleep training for them and like, whoa, exhausted. Please, 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 out of the kind goodness of your heart, you're more than welcome to play the trumpet outside. I'm not trying to take that away from you. I'm asking a favor, basically. Could you do this for me? I think that's reasonable. And also it's reasonable that your neighbor's like, nah, brah, like this is when I have time to practice my trumpet. I'm allowed. I paid for this house and this land and it belongs to me. I am allowed. And that's like the thing with boundaries. Boundaries are for us. We're not setting them for other people. We're saying like, this is our standard. This is what we're doing. And if you're trying to set that boundary for another person, like you're going about it wrong. If you're trying to get somebody to change their behaviors, well, like, first of all, is their behavior harmful? If it's not, and you live in a city, even if you're rural, but I'm definitely going to say for city dwellers, as a city slicker myself, like mind your own business. Like if it's not a harmful thing, I can tell you what's harmful in my environment, in my neighborhood right now. It's feral cats, because we live not that far from a nature preserve and there's feral cats there. So that's doing lots of harm to the environment. Sparrows are not harming the environment the way that feral cats are. So like, is there harm, right? My neighbor's dog barks when they let them out isn't causing you harm. if your neighbor lets their dog out consistently at 1 a.m. while you're sleeping and that wakes you up, that's causing harm. If your neighbor works third shift and they pull into their driveway when they get home and it interrupts your sleep, like that's not causing harm. They're allowed to drive a car and park in the garage, and that's allowed. If they pull in and their music's blasting at an unreasonable hour, like you're allowed to talk to them. So there's a lot of give and take here, and there's some nuance, but like I think that concept of like if you're going to ask someone to change their behavior for your benefit, is there harm? Like saying like, "Hey, I don't like the smell of smoke in my house, so please don't have fires," is an unreasonable request. Like close your windows and don't go outside when someone's having a fire. Like we're members of a society, we're sharing space. You have to deal with some of that within reason, I think. And so I don't think the request to take down a bird feeder is unreasonable. I think that I would have much more grace for that person who's making that request if I knew who they were and why they were making it, because the way they wrote their letter makes me think they just don't like sparrows and don't actually know how ecology works. Which again, I'm not claiming expertise. I do systems work, so I know how ecosystems interact in like a family sense, in a team sense. So I think I have some frame of reference, but not claiming any expertise on birds. I did do like my due diligence to look up and see what was up with sparrows being bad for the environment, because that was news for me. So again, like I think you're going to get better results by doing this personally. And even if you don't want to go talk to it, let's say your neighbor's, I don't know, 320 pounds and gigantic 6'10" human being. They look like an offensive lineman, and you only ever see them chopping wood and listening to aggressive music. I don't know. There's research that suggests that people who listen to metal are happier and healthier overall. So like even that's coming with some stereotyping. But let's say you have some reason to be like, I don't know if talking to this person is a super safe thing, and I want to write them a letter. Like introduce yourself, put your name on it, like own your stuff. If you're asking for a personal favor, or asking for them to change their behavior for your benefit, like own that. And by making it personal, not personally attacking them, but owning your piece in it, you're more likely to create some common ground. So that's really what we're trying to get to when we're setting boundaries and we're trying to communicate our boundaries to people who maybe we don't know, maybe they're acquaintances or neighbors. We don't want to start by saying like, change your behaviors for me because I said so. Like that's going to get a defensive response. It's trying to create common ground. And by co-creating and creating a new understanding, we're much more likely to get a positive response. And by making it about a relationship, we're more likely to be able to co-create. So that's where like knowing who your neighbors are. And like I'm pot calling the kettle black here. Like I'm terrible at this. Like we've lived in our house for about a decade. I said I know some of my neighbors' names, but not all of them. My spouse is much better at it. She's really good at knowing all the dogs' names in the neighborhood, which I also forget. But like again, there's utility to knowing your neighbors. I love living in a city as a city slicker for the anonymity of it. Like I don't want to mess with people and I don't want them messing with me. Like if it's not causing harm, leave it alone. Like mind your business is like a really good thing in the city, I think. I like that. I like minding my own business and I like when people mind their own business. So it's just one of those things where I think there's a healthier way to communicate. I think anonymous complaint letters aren't helpful. And like to bring the story full circle, because of this letter, like we put up 2 more bird feeders. And then our neighbor filed a complaint in the city, which you're allowed to have bird feeders. You're allowed to have up to 4 in case you live in Milwaukee. You can have 4 bird feeders, which is what we have. Which is funny, I think, because like for me, it's like, right, anonymously writing a letter is petty. So I'm going to respond in a petty way. If you talk to me like a human person and with some dignity and respect, like I'm down. Like I'm not trying to make people mad. I will perhaps snark back at some petty people who don't like sparrows but want prettier birds. And like I don't even like the like pay someone to like weed your lawn. Like I don't know. The analogy for bees and pollinators of like a well-mowed lawn that's chemically protected is like an empty warehouse for a bee. Like, great. I like nature. I like pollinators. I like having bunnies in my yard. Like I got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. They like nature too. Like mind your own business about bird feeders. It's not causing harm. So like, yes, is it causing harm? How do we communicate that? relationally. We want to own our piece in it, and we want to approach this person with some new understanding, not with demands, and certainly not with like poorly laid out arguments. I don't like the anonymous letter. Don't write anonymous letters. If you're not willing to put your name on it, it might not be a big enough deal for you to stand up on. And then certainly don't circle back and try and make a complaint, because then, like, right, we had city worker coming to our house and apologizing for wasting our time about a complaint that's not going anywhere. So just wasting lots of people's harm, and now, or wasting lots of people's time, and now you're doing harm to other people by wasting their time because you don't like sparrows. I hope my neighbor follows me. The other thing about it is they put our name on it, right? So like either it's someone who knows us, which I doubt, because we're both, my spouse and I are very approachable people, to a flawed degree. People ask me for stuff all the time, and I'm not an extrovert, so I don't like that. Weed mostly, based on how I look. But it's one of those things where there's this idea of like, right, come and talk to us. So either they know us, which I highly doubt, or they had to look our names up on like the property, the deed, or some city title or whatever. I don't know where they got our information. So like, then that's creepy. Now you're a creeper. And now we're like peering out the window, every time someone goes by to see if they're doing something suspicious or writing us a letter. That's not how to handle it, folks. That's not how we build community. That's not how we make connections. That's not how we set healthy boundaries. Own your stuff, make it relational, try and co-create, like create a new understanding with somebody. That's the way to communicate healthy boundaries. This has been a personal video for me. I think it was good to be able to vent about this whole situation. It's so weird. I hear like horror stories of people who are in like have homeowners agreements, and like it sounds awful, and it's very dramatic, and like you give someone a tiny bit of power and it goes to their head right away. We don't have that. So we'd had kind of a ideal little living in the city, being anonymous little people. And now someone doesn't like our bird feeders. So boundaries, communicate effectively. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for stopping by the channel. Like, subscribe. I'm running out of content ideas, clearly. So drop down in the comments and write what you would like to hear a mental health professional, religious trauma specialist, sports performance coach talk about, or comic book nerd. So long, everybody. Peace.